Hi, this is Attila Yeşilada, reaching out to you from Istanbul, from my humble home office. And today we're going to talk about Turkey's Syria problem. Actually, it is Turkey's Syria problem and Turkey's Syrians problem. Early last week, Turkish cities erupted in violence as majority Turks attacked Syrians, Syrian shops. Several people were killed. Roughly 500 people were arrested. Simultaneously, in Turkey-controlled areas of Syria, Syrians attacked Turkish targets, lorry drivers, and burned Turkish flags. The first part of this video addresses the question of why the sudden inter-communal violence and whether it's a harbinger of things to come. As you know, refugees are a problem everywhere. One reason why Le Pen and her alliance is marching to power in France is the refugees. In the United States, refugees or migrants is also an election issue, with Trump campaigning for a very hard crackdown on migrants from the southern border. Turkey is no different. Secondly, while Turkey and Syria are not officially at war, Turkey has been supporting anti-Assad rebels, now organized under the banner of Free Syrian Army. As well, Turkey has occupied several cantons or provinces adjacent to our border with Syria in order, well, that's Ankara's viewpoint, to defend her borders and to make sure that Turkey's nemesis, the terror organization PKK, doesn't establish a foothold there. Once very close friends, our president, Mr. Erdogan, and Syrian strongman Assad have been at odds since the Syrian war has started. This is the 14th year of the Syrian war, and it is very unlikely to end soon. Nevertheless, things are changing. Syrians and refugees at large are becoming a huge problem for Turkish society and for Mr. Erdogan's AK party. So he changed his tune, and now he wants to make peace with Assad. Up until very recently, Assad said he is not going to meet Erdogan or discuss peace until all Turkish forces vacate Syria, as well as their proxies, the Free Syrian Army. Now he is willing to talk to Erdogan without preconditions. So I want to answer the question whether peace is possible between Erdogan and Assad, and of course, what will happen to the poor Syrian refugees in Turkey. Let's start by providing some context. Since the Syrian war started, at least 4 million Syrians fled to Turkey. Turkey is not the only country which has received her share of Syrian refugees. Jordan, I believe, has an equal number, probably more. Lebanon, a lot of Syrian refugees migrated onwards to Europe. Scandinavian countries, Germany. I was in Milan a couple of years ago. There were even Syrian refugees there. Currently, some of them have returned home. Turkey officially has 3.5 million Syrian refugees. That's only part of Turkey's refugee problem. While there are no official estimates, Syrians, Afghanis, Iraqi Kurds, Iranians, and large migration from Africa has swelled Turkey's refugee population to an estimated 10 million. Turkey's total population, including refugees, is roughly 85 million. Imagine a country where population increased by 10 million people in a decade. 10 million people were completely alien to natives. Obviously, this is creating huge problems. social problems because while most of these people are Muslims as Turkey, their practice of the Muslim faith is completely different. They are also working without social security registration, which means they're completely disrupting the labor market, and they're being exploited by unscrupulous employers. They're working at a wage less than the legal minimum wage. They've built their own communities where only Arabic is spoken. So they live in the secluded ghettos, which, raises the anger of Turks. There is this unjustified fear that they're reproducing much faster than Turks. And eventually, I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding. Eventually, they will become the majority. There is also this urban myth that Erdogan has granted all of them Turkish citizenship, and they are an important factor in Erdogan's election victories. This is also, patently and demonstrably false. But clearly, they're a problem. Whether this is a real problem or perceived problem doesn't really make a difference. There's antagonism between majority Turks and minority Kurds and the refugees. How did we get so many refugees? Well, Mr. Erdogan thought the Syrian war would be over in a couple of months, so he didn't see any problems opening the borders to anyone coming from Syria. Clearly, he was wrong. He liked to keep the refugees in Turkey because he thought they were fertile recruitment ground for Free Syrian Army and also for the fundamentalist and very violent Islamist organizations such as ISIS, Al-Nusra. They have many names, but they have a very medieval and archaic vision of the Quran, and they don't mind killing people, anyone who opposes their vision. Erdogan thought a lot of the Syrian refugees would join these militia, increasing their numbers and making it easy to win a victory against Assad. None of this worked out. At the end, thanks to massive military aid from Iran and Russia, Assad prevailed in most of the western segments of the country. I will provide a map in this video, but essentially Syria is divided vertically, that's from north to south, by the huge river of Euphrates. Assad reigns supreme to the west of Euphrates. The only areas which are not under the control of Damascus are the border cantons administered by Turkey or her proxies, as well as a province towards the Mediterranean coast called Idlib. It's divided. The southern portion is under the control of the Syrian army. The northern portion is under the control of Turkish forces and anti-Assad guerrillas or freedom fighters. I don't really care. When we move to the east of Euphrates River, Kurds reign supreme. They're also the majority there, but there are still also Turkmenis and Arabs as well. Their leading political entity is called YPG. It's not the same as PKK, but it is closely affiliated with PKK. They control the northern quadrant of the eastern portion of the country. The southern quadrant of the eastern portion of Syria is wilderness. It's just desert. There's not much there except oil. The oil wells are controlled by YPG, but the rest is under loose control of the remnants of ISIS and the other fundamentalist organizations. So, Turkey, of course, wants these... lost my train of thought there. The presence of so many refugees led by Syrians has become a problem for Mr. Erdogan when anti-migrant parties started rising in the polls. Currently, the biggest of these is the Victory Party, which polls roughly 5% of the national vote. And it is a single-issue party. It just wants to get rid of migrants. And it gets most of its votes from AKP and its ally, MHP. Clearly, every party has an anti-migrant faction, but most opposition voters are more moderate. To them, migrants are a serious problem, but not what motivates their voting behavior. So it's largely Erdogan's problem. As I've said, the problem came to fore when violence erupted last week. What happens? In the central city of Kayseri, see map below, a Syrian was caught molesting a child. It deeply pains me to talk about these things in a public lavatory. He was almost lynched by the angry Turkish mob. The police arrested him and took the child under protective custody, but it was too late. Through social media, the news was spread all out Turkey. Kayseri burned for 3 days. We don't know much because there was an injunction against press coverage, so Turkish press couldn't cover the issue. We know tidbits, but Syrian shops were burned. Syrians withdrew to their ghettos. If they were caught alone on the street, they were stabbed, beaten, and all sorts of nasty stuff. Then it spread to other cities with large migrant populations, such as Hatay, Kahramanmaraş, etc., Istanbul as well. Simultaneously, Syrians in Turkish-controlled areas began attacking Turkish lorry drivers, postal offices, any Turkish target, and burning the Turkish flag. It seems that the violence has calmed down by Wednesday or Thursday. There is also reason to believe that while the initial reaction and the mob scenes from Kayseri were spontaneous, later on provocateurs were involved. Because of the 500 or more detained, half of them are petty criminals. Clearly, they were put to creating trouble and inciting riots. Who is behind that? I honestly don't know. Victory Party could be. Turkey's another nemesis, the Gülenist terror organization, could be behind it. But in any case, I don't think this is a harbinger of things to come. We also had inter-communal violence in 2021 in Ankara, which also ended in the death of a young Syrian man. But it calmed down. Turks and Syrians don't get along very well, but Turkish society is not at a point where it takes out its anger on Syrians via violence. On the other hand, our ability to predict social explosions like that are as good as our ability to predict financial crises or market outcomes. We do know that the economic conditions in Turkey are ripe for this type of violence. Turkey's austerity program, now in its first year, is creating widespread poverty. This is the way austerity programs work. First, it makes people poorer, and then it achieves its goal of reducing inflation, and in Turkey's case, reducing current account deficits. Even in the best case scenario, this austerity program will remain in place for another 2 years, which means the economic conditions of the average Turk is going to get worse. And there is reason to believe that at some point, these episodes of violence and mobbing against refugees could become a part of Turkish social and political scene. What happened in Syria was also not supported by the majority of the people. Apparently, there, the riots were not necessarily motivated in response to attacks against Syrians in Turkey, but news that Erdogan and Assad are going to make peace. Clearly, if they make peace, these areas will be reverted to Assad's control, and everyone who fought against Assad's will be considered a criminal and prosecuted or persecuted. But what happened has scared Erdogan enough, so much so that he has suddenly changed his Syrian policy. Until then, he had said they're welcome and they can stay as long as they want to. The new rhetoric is that we need to expatriate these people voluntarily and honorably as quickly as possible. Which brings us to the second question. Is peace between Erdogan and Assad possible? Not in the foreseeable future. And I'll tell you why. Assad's conditions are very clear. Turkish forces leave Syria. I get control of all the areas controlled by Turkey and her proxies, and in return, Syrian refugees can come home. As simple as that. As far as the Syrian Kurds go, he doesn't really care much whether they declare autonomy or not. The 80% or so of economic activity in Syria takes place to the west of Euphrates River, where Assad will have full control if Turkey cedes the areas under her control to his regime. The rest is not economically important, and if Kurds want to have autonomy, fine. That's not a major problem for Assad. Turkey's conditions are completely different. Turkey wants to make sure that Assad initiates police or military action against the Kurdish political entity, YPG, PYD, and takes all necessary measures to make sure that Syrian Kurds don't become an autonomous entity. Secondly, Turkey wants to make sure that the conditions are right for Syrian refugees to go home. We don't have too many reports from Syria, but whatever is available to me indicates that those Syrians who believed Assad's promises to voluntarily return home have been persecuted and criminalized. So, peace with Assad and then telling Syrians, well, now there is no more war, go home, is not going to work for Turkey. Syrians are not going to go home. They need to know that there is a political atmosphere there which welcomes them. That means a new government where anti-Assad forces will have some kind of representation or some kind of monitoring by UN or other international agencies to make sure that those Syrians who return home are not persecuted. There's another problem. All the anti-Assad civilians have fled to the province of Idlib. And now the war there has pushed all of them to the northern quadrant, which borders Turkey. It is assumed that if Turkey surrenders the northern portion of the province of Idlib to Assad's forces, at least 500,000 more refugees would flee to Turkey. Among them would be 20 to 30,000 jihadis, very violent, bloodthirsty militants. So peace in the first instance would mean Turkey's refugee problem will get worse. So this is where we stand. I think dialogue between Assad and Erdogan will start. Russia is trying to bring them together. Also, the Iraqi government, they will meet and talk, but I don't foresee a future where Assad accepts Turkey's conditions, such as a more representative government. At the end, though, Assad does have an incentive to make peace with Turkey, simply because his economy is in ruins. It used to trade a lot with Lebanon. Now Lebanon is poor because of the border skirmishes with Israel. Its financial system is insolvent. So really, there's not much going on in the Syrian economy. Whereas Gulf Arab countries have promised tons of financial aid to Assad if he can declare peace. The reconstruction of Syria is going to be as expensive as reconstructing Ukraine. Probably we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars, and Assad doesn't have any money. He has oil, which is barely enough to cover basic exports, but that's all. No industry, very little agriculture. So the only thing that entices Assad to peace is the promise of financial aid. Eventually, he may honor Turkey's conditions, but that will take years. So where do we go from here? As I've said, if Erdogan sticks to this current austerity program, there is reason to believe that we may see more violence. But at the very end, it's a political problem with Erdogan. As I've indicated in my previous videos, Turkey will probably have early elections by the end of 2025 or so, where the anti-immigrant party would rise further and steal seats from AKP and MHP. Will Syrians ever go home? Maybe 90% will never go home. They have nothing to go back to. The cities where they come from have been leveled. They have lost their jobs. These things don't come back. I mean, imagine something as simple as operating a bakery. You can go back and open your bakery, but if your suppliers are not in business, you are not going to get flour, you're not going to get oil, you are not going to get, fuel to produce bread. So it's not so simple to start a new life. Also, why? I mean, most of them have found some kind of jobs in Turkey. Their children probably don't speak Arabic too well. So at the end, very few will return. Perhaps if they're offered very generous financial compensation packages, 25% will return, according to some polls. What is Turkey to do? Well, the first thing is better border control so we don't get more refugees. 2, accept the fact that Syrians are now the third largest ethnic group in Turkey after Turks and Kurds, and try to peacefully integrate them into the Turkish society, which means registering them, granting them citizenship under certain conditions, such as speaking Turkish fluently, opening schools for their children so that they can learn both Arabic and Turkish, and making sure these poor people, and in particular their children, don't fall prey to mafia or child trafficking rings. Really hate that portion of the video. And turn them into productive citizens which can contribute to Turkish economy and pay taxes. It's a hugely costly effort, but it can be done. But unfortunately, we're talking about a time frame of 10 years. So for the next few years, Syrian refugees and Syria is going to be a major Turkish policy problem. Thank you very much for watching this video. I always enjoy your comments, and if you want me to record videos on any different subject, please let me know. I'll try to honor your requests as much as I'm capable of. This is Atilla Yeşilada saying goodbye from sunny Istanbul. Have a good week.